Dr. Adrian Clark stared at the data streaming across his screen, his mind struggling to process the impossible results. The lab was silent, the hum of equipment the only sound as his team waited for her to speak. They had spent years chasing a theory that most of their peers dismissed as science fiction, but now, staring at the raw numbers, Adrian knew they had stumbled upon something far beyond their understanding. "This can't be right," he finally muttered, his voice barely audible. "Run the simulation again." His assistant, Nia, hesitated before nodding. She knew Adrian was meticulous, never one to accept an outcome without thorough scrutiny, but they had run the simulation a dozen times. The results were always the same. "One more time," Adrian insisted, as Nia began the process again. The room dimmed as the mainframe kicked into high gear, processing the unimaginable quantities of data. The screens flashed, displaying complex patterns and equations that seemed to stretch the boundaries of known physics. Adrian's heart raced, not from fear, but from the dawning realization that their theory might not just be a theory anymore. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, tension building with each passing second. When the results finally appeared on the screen, confirming the previous runs, Adrian felt a mix of awe and dread. The implications were staggering. Nia broke the silence, her voice shaky. "Adrian, if this is real, if what we're seeing is true, then the universe, our universe, is just one layer of a much larger simulation." Adrian nodded slowly, his mind racing to grasp the enormity of what they had discovered. "Not just one layer, Nia. If our calculations are correct, we could be looking at an infinite series of nested simulations, each one contained within another." The lab fell silent again, each scientist lost in their thoughts. They had uncovered a secret so profound, so dangerous, that it could unravel the very fabric of reality. But there was no turning back now. They had to understand what they had found, no matter the cost. "We need to be careful," Adrian said, his voice steadying as he took control. "If this is true, then whatever is running the simulation, whatever created this, might know we've discovered it." Nia frowned, glancing nervously at the darkened corners of the room. You think it's aware of us?" "I don't know," Adrian admitted. "But we can't take any chances. From now on, we proceed with extreme caution. We need to understand how deep this goes, and if there's a way out." With a new sense of urgency, the team began their work. They would explore the depths of this simulated reality, uncover its secrets, and perhaps find a way to escape. But as they delved deeper, they would soon realize that they weren't just observing the simulation, it was observing them. Dr. Adrian Clark paced nervously around the sterile lab, his eyes scanning the rows of monitors displaying complex data streams. The discovery they had made was groundbreaking, but it was also terrifying. The realization that their entire universe might be a simulation had shaken him to his core. Nia, seated at the main console, was furiously typing, her eyes locked on the screen. "Adrian, you need to see this," she called out, her voice tinged with urgency. Adrian hurried over, his heart racing with a mix of anticipation and dread. The data on Nia's screen showed something he had feared but hoped was just a glitch. "It's happening again," she said, pointing to the flickering data. "Another layer is breaking down." Adrian stared at the screen, his mind reeling. The simulations within the simulation were beginning to collapse, one by one. "How many layers deep are we now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Too many to count," Nia replied, her fingers continuing to fly over the keyboard. "And if this keeps up, we might never find our way back to the real world, if it even exists." Adrian ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm the rising panic. "We need to stabilize the system, find the core of this simulation, and shut it down." "But what if the core is just another layer?" Nia countered, her eyes meeting his. "What if there is no real world anymore?" Adrian didn't have an answer for that. The thought was too horrifying to fully comprehend. But he knew one thing for sure, they couldn't stop now. They had to keep pushing forward, no matter how deep the rabbit hole went. "We keep going," he said firmly. "We find the source, and we end this. Whatever it takes." Nia nodded, her resolve strengthening. "Agreed. But we need to be careful. If the simulation is aware of us, it might start fighting back." As if on cue, the lights in the lab flickered, and the monitors briefly went dark before returning to life. Adrian and Nia exchanged a wary glance. It was as if the simulation was warning them, telling them to stop. But they wouldn't. They couldn't. Not when they were so close to the truth. The lab was silent, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional tap of Nia's fingers on the keyboard. Adrian stood by the window, staring out into the night. The city below was a sprawling web of lights and activity, but to him, it felt hollow, like the flickering images on a screen, real yet somehow not. He turned back to Nia, who was still engrossed in her work. Any progress? Nia shook her head, frustration evident on her face. Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, the data changes. It's like the simulation is adapting, trying to stay one step ahead of us. Adrian sighed, running a hand through his hair. We need another angle. If we can't find the core directly, maybe we can force the simulation to reveal itself. Nia looked up, curious. How? We disrupt the system, Adrian explained, pacing again as he thought aloud. Introduce something it can't predict, something outside its programming. If we create enough chaos, it might expose its vulnerabilities. Nia frowned. That's risky. We have no idea how the simulation will react. It could erase us, or worse, trap us in a loop forever. I know, Adrian replied, stopping to face her. But at this point, we're running out of options. We're already being watched, every move we make is being anticipated. We need to do something it won't expect. Nia considered his words, then nodded slowly. All right. But what kind of disruption are we talking about? Adrian's mind raced as he tried to think of a scenario that would challenge the simulation. Then, an idea struck him. What if we simulate a break in reality? A glitch so severe that it forces the system to reset itself? Nia's eyes widened. A paradox, she murmured. But creating a paradox within a simulation, it's dangerous, Adrian. We could end up tearing the whole thing apart. Exactly, Adrian said, his voice calm but determined. And in doing so, we might find the answers we're looking for. If the simulation tries to fix itself, we could trace the corrections back to the core. Nia took a deep breath, then nodded. It's a long shot, but it could work. We just need to figure out how to create a paradox. We start by breaking the rules, Adrian said. The laws of physics, time, logic, anything that the simulation relies on to maintain order. If we can disrupt those, we might force its hand. As they began working on the plan, the air in the lab seemed to grow heavier, as if the simulation itself was aware of their intentions. But neither of them hesitated. They were too far in to back out now. As they prepared to execute their plan, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not just by the simulation, but by something, or someone, beyond it. But he pushed the thought aside. They had a job to do, and the truth was within reach. The next few days passed in a blur of calculations, simulations, and failed experiments. Each time they tried to create a paradox, the simulation adapted, countering their attempts with precision. It was as if the system was toying with them, letting them get close before pulling the rug out from under their feet. Frustration mounted, but Adrian and Nia pressed on, determined to crack the code. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they made a breakthrough. It's ready, Nia said, her voice tinged with exhaustion and triumph. The paradox engine. If this works, it'll create a loop that the simulation can't resolve without exposing its core. Adrian looked at the device, a small, unassuming box with wires and circuits running in all directions. It was hard to believe that something so simple could hold the key to unraveling the fabric of their reality. Are you sure about this? He asked, his hand hovering over the switch. Once we start, there's no going back. Nia met his gaze, her expression resolute. This is what we've been working for, Adrian. We have to know the truth, no matter the cost. With a nod, Adrian flipped the switch. The paradox engine hummed to life, emitting a low, steady pulse that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. At first, nothing happened. But then, the room began to warp and distort, as if reality itself was bending under the strain of the paradox. Nia's voice was barely audible over the rising noise. It's working, it's destabilizing the simulation. Adrian watched in awe and terror as the walls around them began to flicker, revealing glimpses of other places, other worlds. The simulation was unraveling, and with it, the boundaries between the layers of reality. But just as quickly as it started, the paradox engine sputtered and died, the room snapping back to its original state. No! Nia cried out, rushing to the device. We were so close. Adrian's heart sank as he realized the truth. The simulation had adapted once again, neutralizing their final attempt. They were trapped, with no way to find the core. But as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Adrian noticed something, an anomaly on one of the monitors. A small flicker, barely noticeable, but it was there. Nia, look, he said, pointing to the screen. Nia hurried over, her eyes widening as she saw it too. It's a breach. The simulation must have missed it when it reset. Adrian felt a surge of hope. This could be it, the way out. They quickly began working to expand the breach, using the last of their resources to keep it open. The simulation fought back, trying to close the gap, but this time, Adrian and Nia were faster. As the breach widened, it revealed a tunnel of light leading to an unknown destination. It was their only chance. Let's go, Adrian said, grabbing Nia's hand. They stepped into the breach, leaving the crumbling simulation behind. As they were pulled through the tunnel, Adrian couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on the other side. Was it the real world? Another layer? Or something else entirely? Adrian and Nia were engulfed in the tunnel of light, their bodies pulled forward with a force they couldn't resist. The walls around them shimmered with an array of colors, pulsating and shifting in ways that defied logic. It was disorienting, yet mesmerizing, as if they were traveling through the very fabric of the universe. Suddenly, the light began to fade, and the force pulling them forward slowed. They tumbled out into a new space, landing hard on an unfamiliar surface. Adrian groaned, pushing himself up to his knees, and looked around. They were in a vast, open space that seemed to stretch on forever. The ground beneath them was smooth, almost reflective, and the sky, or what passed for a sky, was a swirling mass of energy, like a storm frozen in time. Nia stood beside him, wide-eyed. Where are we? Adrian shook his head, trying to make sense of their surroundings. I don't know. But this doesn't look like the simulation. They took a few cautious steps forward, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The air here was different, too thicker, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. It was as if they were walking through a place that wasn't fully formed, a world caught between existence and nothingness. As they moved further into this strange realm, they noticed shapes and structures beginning to emerge in the distance. Towering spires, twisting and contorting in impossible angles, rose up from the ground. They were unlike anything Adrian or Nia had ever seen, almost as if they were made from pure energy, shifting and changing with every glance. Nia pointed ahead. Look! Adrian followed her gaze and saw a figure standing at the base of one of the spires. It was humanoid but had a faint, translucent quality, as if it was only half real. The figure seemed to be waiting for them. Cautiously, they approached, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. As they drew closer, the figure turned to face them, its features becoming clearer. It had no distinct facial features, just smooth, flowing lines where a face should be. Yet, there was an undeniable presence about it, a sense of awareness that made it feel almost alive. Welcome, the figure said, its voice echoing in their minds rather than through the air. Adrian exchanged a nervous glance with Nia before addressing the figure. Where are we? What is this place? The figure tilted its head, as if considering the question. You have crossed the boundary between layers. This is the space between simulations, where the constructs of different realities converge. Nia's breath caught. So, we're still in a simulation? The figure's form rippled slightly, as if amused. All realities are simulations of a sort. Some are simply more stable than others. What you perceive as reality is but one layer of a much larger construct. Adrian's mind raced as he tried to process this information. And you? What are you? I am a guardian, the figure replied. My purpose is to maintain the balance between layers, to ensure that the integrity of the construct is preserved. Nia took a step forward, her voice firm. We're looking for the core of the simulation we came from. We need to find the truth, to understand who or what created it. The Guardian's form shimmered. The core you seek is not within any one layer. It is the convergence point, the origin from which all layers stem. To reach it, you must pass through many veils, each more complex than the last. Adrian frowned. So, we just keep going deeper? How do we know when we've reached the core? The Guardian's voice softened. You will know when you are ready. But be warned, the deeper you go, the less recognizable reality will become. You may find that the truth is not what you expected. Nia glanced at Adrian, her expression resolute. We didn't come this far to turn back now. Adrian nodded in agreement. We'll do whatever it takes. Show us the way. The Guardian extended a hand, and a portal began to form in the air before them, swirling with the same energy that filled the sky. This path will take you to the next layer. But remember, each step forward is a step away from the world you knew. The choice to continue is yours. Without hesitation, Adrian and Nia stepped toward the portal, their determination outweighing their fear. They had come too far to stop now. As they crossed the threshold, the world around them dissolved into light, and they felt themselves being pulled into another reality, one that was even more alien than the last. The transition was smoother this time, as if the layers were becoming easier to navigate. Adrian and Nia emerged from the portal into a world that was both familiar and foreign. They stood in what looked like a city, but the buildings were warped and twisted, defying the laws of architecture. The streets were empty, and the air buzzed with an unseen energy. This place. Nia began, her voice trailing off as she tried to find the right words. It's like a reflection of our world, Adrian finished, studying the strange, distorted landscape. But not quite real. As they walked through the empty streets, they noticed echoes of people, faint, ghostly images that flickered in and out of existence. The figures moved as if they were going about their daily lives, but they were insubstantial, like shadows caught between two worlds. Nia reached out to touch one of the figures, but her hand passed through it as if it wasn't there. Are these simulations of people? Adrian nodded slowly. Or echoes. Leftovers from the real world, maybe. This layer might be where the simulation stores the memories and actions of everyone inside it. They continued exploring, the eerie silence broken only by the occasional flicker of an echo. The city felt like a maze, each turn leading them deeper into the heart of the distortion. Eventually, they came across a building that stood out from the rest. It was a tall, imposing structure, its walls covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with energy. The entrance was open, inviting them in. This has to be it, Adrian said, his voice filled with a mix of anticipation and dread. The next step. Nia nodded, taking a deep breath. Let's find out what's waiting for us. They entered the building, the air growing colder as they stepped inside. The interior was vast and empty, save for a single console in the center of the room. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter as they approached, casting an eerie light over the space. Adrian moved to the console, his hands hovering over the controls. This must be the interface for this layer. Nia joined him, her eyes scanning the strange symbols. Can you access it? Adrian nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. I think so. If we can find the right sequence, we might be able to move forward. He began inputting commands, the console responding with a series of beeps and flashes. As he worked, the room seemed to pulse in time with the symbols, the energy building with each passing second. Suddenly, the console emitted a high-pitched whine, and the entire building shook. The walls rippled like water, the symbols flashing rapidly. What's happening? Nia asked, her voice tinged with alarm. Adrian's hands flew over the controls. I don't know. It's like the system is fighting back. The building continued to shake, the energy reaching a fever pitch. The echoes outside began to flicker more rapidly, their forms distorting as the simulation struggled to maintain its integrity. Adrian, we need to get out of here, Nia shouted, grabbing his arm. But before they could move, the console emitted a blinding flash of light, and everything went still. When the light faded, Adrian and Nia found themselves in a new space, completely different from the city. They were standing on a platform suspended in a void, surrounded by endless darkness. The only light came from a massive, glowing orb that floated above them, pulsating with a rhythm that felt almost alive. "This is it," Adrian whispered, awe and fear mixing in his voice. "We've reached the core." Nia stared at the orb, her heart pounding. "What do we do now?" Before Adrian could answer, the orb began to pulse faster, its light growing brighter. A voice echoed through the void, deep and resonant. "Welcome," it said. "You have reached the heart of the construct. Your journey ends here." Adrian stepped forward, his voice steady. "We're not here to end the journey. We want answers. What is this place? Who created it?" The voice rumbled with a hint of amusement. "You seek knowledge, but are you prepared for the truth?" Nia stood beside Adrian, her resolve unwavering. "We've come this far. We're ready." The orb's light flared, enveloping them in a blinding glow. As the light consumed them, they felt themselves being pulled into the orb, into the very essence of the construct. As Adrian and Nia were pulled into the core of the simulation, they braced themselves for what they thought would be the ultimate truth, the center of everything they had been searching for. But what they found inside was not the answer they had been hoping for, it was something far more complex and terrifying. The core was a vast, glowing chamber filled with countless orbs, each one displaying a different simulation layer. The walls were lined with intricate circuits and holographic screens that flickered with strange symbols and data streams. It was as if they had stepped into the very mind of the simulation itself. Adrian's breath caught in his throat as he looked around. This is it," he whispered. "The heart of the simulation. The place where all the layers converge." Nia walked slowly around the room, her eyes wide as she took in the sheer scope of what they were seeing. "Look at these orbs, Adrian. They're showing us different worlds, different realities." Adrian approached one of the orbs, his fingers trembling as he reached out to touch it. The moment his hand made contact, the image within the orb shifted, showing him a familiar scene, one of the simulation layers they had passed through earlier. "This is where we were, but look, Nia. There are so many others we've never even seen." Nia moved to stand beside him, her gaze locked on the swirling images within the orbs. "These are all different simulations, different versions of reality. And we can interact with them." Adrian's mind raced as he began to understand the implications of what they were seeing. Each orb represented a separate layer of the simulation, a different world with its own rules and physics. But as he continued to explore the orbs, he noticed something even more disturbing. "There's a pattern here," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Each of these layers, they're all connected. But they're not just connected, they're nested within each other. Like Russian dolls, one inside the other," Adrian finished, his voice trembling with the realization. Nia stared at the orbs, her mind struggling to grasp the full scale of what they were witnessing. "You're saying, we're inside a simulation that's inside another simulation? And there are countless more?" Adrian nodded, his eyes darting from orb to orb, each representing a different reality, a different layer. "Yes. And it's not just a few layers, it's infinite. Every time we think we've reached the core, it's just another layer, another part of a larger simulation." The truth was staggering, a revelation that shook them to their very core. They had believed they were on the verge of uncovering the ultimate truth, the foundation of their reality, only to discover that they were still trapped within an endless series of simulated worlds, each one more complex than the last. Adrian's hands began to shake as he moved from orb to orb, seeing entire universes contained within them, each one with its own set of rules, its own existence. "It's all connected, Nia. Every reality, every universe, it's all part of something much larger, something we can't even begin to understand." Nia felt a chill run down her spine as she tried to process the enormity of it all. And the real world? Is there even a real world, or is it just another layer, another simulation? Adrian didn't have an answer. The more they saw, the less certain he became of anything. I don't know, Nia. I don't know what's real anymore. They continued to explore the core, moving deeper into the chamber, where the orbs became more intricate, the simulations more complex. The further they went, the more they realized that they were no closer to the truth than when they had started. This place, it's like a library of realities, Nia said, her voice tinged with awe and fear. Every possible version of existence, stored here, layered one on top of the other. Adrian nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, fixated on a terrifying thought. If this is the center, the heart of the simulation, then who or what created it? And why? That was the question that had been gnawing at him since they first discovered the truth about their reality. If they were living in a simulation, then there had to be a creator, someone or something that had designed it, built it, and maintained it. But as they stood in the core, surrounded by endless layers of simulated worlds, Adrian began to doubt whether they would ever find the answers they were looking for. They reached the center of the chamber, where a massive orb floated, larger than all the others combined. It pulsed with energy, sending waves of light and data rippling through the air. This was the core of the simulation, the place where all the layers converged. Adrian and Nia approached it cautiously, both of them feeling the weight of what they were about to do. They had come so far, fought so hard to get here, but now that they were finally at the center, the truth seemed more elusive than ever. Nia reached out and touched the orb, her fingers brushing against its surface. The moment she made contact, the orb began to shift, displaying a vast map of the universe. But it wasn't just a universe, it was every universe, every layer of the simulation mapped out in exquisite detail. Adrian's breath caught in his throat as he looked at the map. This is it, Nia. This is everything. Every reality, every possibility, it's all here. But as they studied the map, a horrifying realization began to dawn on them. The map showed not just their universe, but an infinite number of universes, each one nested within another, each one a simulation within a simulation. It's never ending, Adrian said, his voice barely a whisper. There's no end to it. No matter how far we go, how deep we dig, we'll never find the bottom. We'll never find the truth. Nia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Adrian, seeing the despair in his eyes. Then what do we do? We've come so far, and for what? To find out that it's all meaningless? Adrian shook his head, trying to keep himself from breaking down. I don't know, Nia. I don't know what we can do. We're just lost. For a moment, they stood there in silence, staring at the map of infinite realities, each one a labyrinth with no exit. It was more than their minds could comprehend, more than they could bear. Nia finally broke the silence, her voice soft but filled with determination. Then let's keep going. Adrian looked at her, confused. What? Nia took his hand, her grip firm and steady. Let's keep going, Adrian. Let's keep searching, keep exploring. If we're lost, then let's get lost together. Let's see how far we can go, how deep this rabbit hole really is. Adrian hesitated, the weight of the endless simulation bearing down on him. But as he looked into Nia's eyes, he saw a spark of hope, a refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds. A small, weary smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're crazy, you know that? Nia smiled back, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Maybe. But what else do we have? If this is our reality, then let's make the most of it. Let's find out who or what is behind all this. And if we never find the answers, well, at least we tried. Adrian nodded, his resolve strengthening. All right. Let's do it. Let's see how far this goes. Together, they turned away from the map of infinite realities and walked deeper into the core, ready to face whatever came next. They didn't know what they would find or if they would ever find a way out, but they knew one thing for certain, they would face it together. As they disappeared into the depths of the simulation, Nia's voice echoed through the chamber, filled with determination and hope. Let's get lost, Adrian. Let's get lost and see where it takes us. And with that, they vanished into the unknown, two souls lost in an infinite labyrinth of possibilities, searching for the truth that lay just beyond their reach.